Jim, let's get a question or two and get out of here. This next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Paco in Westbrook, Maine. I was listening to an old episode, and you spoke about how talent should set up a match with their opponent based on who is where and how they are being showcased. My question is, how do you know, or when do you know, when to elevate a talent from jobber to beginning match, or from mid-card to main event card? What do you look for, and how much time do you give the talent to show and prove? Thank you for the lessons and laughs.
To show and prove?
Show and prove.
Oh, show and prove. Again, there's no formula. There's no, okay, you're going to put this guy in this position for 6 weeks and then blah, blah, blah. We mentioned on a show here recently, and there's a clip on the YouTube channel about how bookers the difference in how they would instruct a guy on how to work with a guy and what his finish was based on the level of how much they wanted that guy to get over, whether it was a squash match or whether it was a competitive match, but he still loses, or a competitive match and he wins, or whatever the case. Sometimes it's all part of your plan, Smithers. You bring a guy in with the thought that you're going to start him at the bottom because he's young, and as he gets more experienced, you can tell that he's got the talent and he should develop and blossom to where you want to use him for a long period of time, and you're going to elevate him up the cards by as he gets better and he gets more notoriety with the people, he's going to get bigger matches and he's going to start winning more. I did that with Candido in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Other times a guy will be on the card. Maybe a booker likes a guy and he has been using him, and suddenly he either sees the guy doing something that's new, or the people are starting to get into the guy a little bit more because he's got some charisma or just something about him, or he's doing something. Or the booker gets an idea and say, you know what, this would be perfect. I could juice up old, Donnie Dipshit on the third match if he joined the manager or he, got this new attitude or changed his gimmick up or whatever. So it could be an idea from the booker on how to take that guy from just a normal underneath wrestler and making him a bit more of an attraction. Or it could be because they see the fans are enjoying him. Bobby Fulton did the same thing. Bobby Fulton came into Memphis in, I think it was 1981, maybe late 81, early 82, as the lowest babyface on the totem pole. He had no gimmick. He had dark hair and tights and boots. And he was the youngest guy. He was the least experienced guy. But Dundee was the booker at the time, and Dundee liked him because Bobby worked hard and he loved the business, and you could tell there was something there. And Bobby started working on his body and getting in better shape because he'd been a pudgy little young man. But then all of a sudden he's got arms on him and he's got a tan, and the girls are starting to take to him. All of a sudden he's turned 22, for heaven's sake. And so they started doing a little bit more with him and putting him in some angles. And you test the water with that to where maybe, the guy on TV goes a little longer with the top heel than you would have thought. And the top heel gets a little frustrated and the announcers start talking about it. And it doesn't happen overnight where suddenly the guy goes from zero to hero, but he starts getting better and his look changes and his presentation changes. And then that's why by the summer of 83, when Dundee got the spot to go and book for Ole in Georgia that little bit, took a bunch of us down there, he put Bobby together with Terry Taylor as the Fabulous Ones offshoot, the Fantastic Ones, because now in a smaller territory with an upgraded gimmick and the past year and a half of experience working with all these guys, Bobby Fulton was capable of, instead of being the low man in a good territory, he could be a top man in a startup territory. And that didn't work out, but that wasn't because of Bobby's work. It was because of the territory. But then within 6 months, they bring the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, into Mid-South Wrestling. and into Dallas, and they get over because the people didn't see them as preliminary guys. They hadn't seen Bobby Fulton 3 years ago. They saw him now, what he's doing now, in a different place, being presented as a main event level guy with more experience behind it and the ability to carry it off. So there's all varieties of ways that you would move guys up, or that you would change guys' gimmicks, and as they grew up and as they got older and as they figured out things to do. And there's no one way to say that. So I've said about 14 different ways there.
How do you know when to give up on someone? And I'm not saying this is a perfect example of that, but I remember in early 85 Mid-South, Edgar Boo Thomas, one of my favorite names. One of these names that I'll never forget, but he had an actual wrestling background. He's there for a reason, but it never really went anywhere. How do you know when to give up on someone you're trying to either elevate or give a chance to give you a sign that they should be elevated?
Well, when your booker goes out and sits in the arena and listens to the people and watches the matches, and either the match is not real good, or the people ain't really caring, or the opponent always comes back and go, God damn, it's like fucking pulling teeth. Get a match out of him, or any or all of those together. Edgar Boo Thomas, and it was an odd name. It wasn't Edgar, it was Edcar. That was his real name, Edcar, Edcar, and his nickname was Boo. Boo Thomas, because he was a wrestler and I believe football player from somewhere in the Mid-South region, maybe Oklahoma-ish or whatever. He's a young African-American kid. And a part of it was he was doomed because there was another black guy they were trying to push after Dog left. Even though they weren't trying to put him in the top spot right away, it was still just fairly or unfairly, everybody was compared to Dog. But also, sometimes the athletes from other sports, maybe they don't have the personality or the aptitude. As I recall, I don't know if it was a personality problem, maybe just an aptitude problem with picking up pro wrestling. Nick Goulas tried to do the same thing with a football player. And I don't know where they come up with those names. This guy's name in 1978 was Shawnee Bowen. Shawnee, Shawney, Bo, B-O, Wynn, W-Y-N-N. Shawnee Bowen, who was a football star somewhere in Tennessee, I think. And they tried to push him, and he was a young black kid too. But there was no junkyard dog that he was coming after. He just was a lousy wrestler. And I mean, there's times that football players, real sports athletes that cross over, especially if they're from that area, a local college athlete or star that's already had publicity, they get pushed over a regular guy because the promoter wants to capitalize as quickly as he can on, this guy's name value that he had before he ever became a wrestler. But in the process, sometimes that rushes guys into positions they're not ready for. But I mean, it's happened a million times where, a guy will have a gimmick for a wrestler, a booker will, and he'll say, hey, do this, and it just doesn't work. And that doesn't mean that the guy was bad or anything, or sometimes it does, but sometimes the push or the presentation didn't work. Sometimes, you're stuck doing things you need to do it with Prince Karras, the Mummy. Well, I love the guy in the mummy outfit. I wouldn't have done the mummy if Rick Rubin hadn't wanted a mummy. And he did the best mummy that mummy could hope for, but people didn't want a mummy. So we put him back in the crypt.